G'day guys, John here, Chief Instructor with FPV Australia. As you know, we are a certified training school with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, have been for some time now, and we offer certified training for REOC and REPL and all that sort of stuff for these guys. However, there is a lot of people out there now wanting to fly these things, both recreationally and in the excluded category, i.e. the sub 2 kilo category. And so what we thought we'd do is we would launch a range of online training videos that are absolutely free, that will take you through all of the hurdles and the misnomers and all the stuff that you need to know in order to get one of these things in the air safely and legally. So this is the first of the series. There'll be a number of these videos. We're gonna keep them fairly short. We're not gonna make them long-winded. But what it will do is it'll enable anyone who is going out today to buy a drone or have already got a drone and they're not really sure if what they're doing is legal, we'll help them with that. The videos are also designed to help you get in the air safely, understand what your obligations are, depending whether you're flying recreational, whether you're flying under the sub 2 kilo excluded category, or you're thinking about chasing full certification for these things. So the point of these videos is to give you some form of training, if you want to call it that, some tuition that can help you get started. So it saves someone going out there and buying one of these completely cold outside, flick it on and go for your life, not having any clue about what they should or shouldn't be doing. So hopefully these series of videos that we're aptly calling Drone Sense. It's like common sense, but for those that have a drone. So we'll call it Drone Sense. Hopefully by the end of the Drone Sense program, you'll have a far better understanding of what you can and can't do with these. You'll have a bit of knowledge about the rules and the regulations, where you can and can't fly them, what your obligations are, and all that sort of stuff. That's the plan. So let's get started. I guess if you're new to the drone industry and you're not sure, what is legal and what isn't legal, let's start on that. What can you do with these things legally? They're basically three tiers now. There is the recreational pilot, someone who wants to buy one of these and just go and have fun with it. Go out on the family outings and bushwalks and whatever else and put a drone up and get some fabulous stuff. There is no requirement for any sort of licensing or registration or anything like that for the recreational pilot. So if you're going out to JB Hi-Fi, for instance, or the Apple store, or come to us here and buy one of these for fun, then there's no requirements for licensing. But there are still rules and regulations about what you can and can't do. We'll cover them later. So recreational, no requirement for registration, no requirement for licensing. What about someone who wants to use it commercially? So there's two tiers for that now. There is the sub 2 kilo or excluded category, because the excluded category, believe it or not, actually has some heavier machines in that category under certain circumstances, and we'll cover that later. So let's call it the excluded category, but those that want to fly these sort of know it as the sub 2 kilo rules. What's the requirement for an individual to buy one of these machines and go and fly it commercially? So there is the sub 2 kilo range category. So what that means is you have to jump on the CASA website and register yourself. And there's two stages to that registration. There is the ARN first. What is an ARN? It's a registration number with CASA. We'll put links in this video to show you where to go and get that information. You basically fill in all the details, submit it to Clark, the CASA's licensing and registration, and they will issue you with your registration number. Once you have that, you then need to register for the use of the sub 2 kilo drone in the excluded category. And there's a place on the CASA website where you do that. Again, links are in the video here. So you go and register your interest to go and want to fly these commercially. It has to be done 5 days before your first flight. Okay, so there's a lot of talk online about it. You've got to notify CASA before every flight. That is actually incorrect. It's only the first flight. And it relates to anything that is sub 2 kilo. So this machine qualifies as sub 2 kilo. Believe it or not, so does the Spark. So if you want to use this in a commercial environment somehow, you will need to register yourself on the CASA website. And there are rules about what you can and can't do, and we'll get to them later. That's that. If you wanted to fly something larger than this, or you want to fly this drone outside of the standard operating conditions, again, we're going to cover all this, then you will need to get certified with a REPL, for short, REPL, Remote Pilot's License, and then operate under a REOC, a Remote Operator Certificate. You can apply for the operator certificate yourself, or if you know someone that has one and they're willing to let you fly under theirs, you can fly under their REOC, or you can be employed by someone to fly under their company REOC, so to speak. So they're the basic three levels of certification. There's, three levels of categories. There's the consumer, recreational, hobbyist, whatever you want to call them. No registration required, nothing is required to go and do that. Obviously, you'll need to abide by whatever rules are in place at the park you're going to fly, whether the council says you can fly or you can't fly. We recommend go and join a club. There's plenty of flying fields scattered all over the country, run by people like the MAAA or AMAS. They're model associations, because effectively that's what this will be if you're flying at recreational. It comes under the model aircraft framework. And go and find people who know how to fly these things and have a bit of fun and get started that way. But you're allowed to fly them in public in places as well, and we'll cover all that. There's the sub 2 kilo or the excluded category, which allows you to run these commercially under a very strict standard operating condition environment. We'll tell you about that. You'll have to register and all that sort of stuff, get your RN. And then there is the full certification route. They're the three. So what I thought we'd do in these first videos is break them down, and with the aid of post-production, I'm going to walk you through what the requirements are for each one. So again, let's just recap, firstly starting with the recreational pilot. So the recreational pilot has a strict set of rules. They are, you're not allowed to fly above 400 feet in controlled airspace. Now this is a really interesting one. Outside of controlled airspace under current regulation, there is no 400-foot ceiling. We highly recommend that you do not fly more than 400 feet above the ground, because you're starting to mix with manned aircraft. Once you get into the 500 feet plus, you're entering the realm of manned aviation. So even if you are outside of controlled airspace in the middle of nowhere, it's a really good idea to stay under 400 feet. Great, you're not allowed to fly at night. Again, this is the standard operating conditions, and I'm going to tell you how we can get around some of these, but you're not allowed to operate at night. Now, what is night? There's a bit of conjecture here about what is night, and I'm going to clarify it for you. It's not sunset. Night there's a technical term, and I've explained it before in other videos, about the end of civil twilight. If you look up last light, and you find the last light for your location, and later on in this series, I'm going to talk to you about all these different apps and all the places you can find this stuff. That's when night starts. The confusion is, there is a term in aviation called HJ and HN, which are for demonstrating after sunset and before sunset. And HJ means right up until sunset, and HN starts at sunset and ends at sunrise. So ignore that. The night time, not allowed to fly at night stuff, is at the end of civil twilight, basically last light. You've got about, depending where you are, about 20 minutes after sunset, depending on conditions and depending on location. We often tell our students, though, the best rule of thumb is if the sun's going down, you need to think about bringing your drone down, okay? So that's that. So you're not allowed that. You're not allowed within 30 metres of anybody. Now that is, when I say anybody not associated with the aircraft itself. So if you've got a fellow who's just standing here watching you, 30 metres is the distance he has to be away from this active drone. Any member of the public, any member of your family, anyone else has to be a minimum of 30 metres from the drone. And again, there's some arguments about buildings and cars and boats and whatever else. Well, the regulation states 30 metres. The advice from people, the advice out of CASA is stay away from boats, cars and buildings as well, because you're likely to stay a whole lot safer if you do that. So, it's common sense here, I guess. Drone sense, there it is. I'll get one in. 30 metres is the rule. Recreational pilots can't shorten that out in the real world. You can't shorten that. If you're down at the riverbank or something, and you're on picnic or bushwalk, 30 metres. That's it. Things like the populous rules still apply. You're not allowed to fly over populous areas. And what's populous? Well, the regulation sort of states that if the drone fails and there's a density of population that it hits someone in the head, then it's populous, right? It needs to, if there's too many people around when it fails and it hits someone, that's populous. But above that as well, the model flyer, the recreational pilot, is also covered by Hazardous Operation Regulation 101.055, meaning you cannot fly this machine in a manner that is deemed hazardous to people, property or other aircraft. So if you're zipping around the beach 5 feet above people's heads, you're going to see how easy that's going to be considered hazardous, okay? So there's sort of the basic ones. I'll put them all up here behind me and you can have a quick look at them, the basic rule sets that will keep you safe, and I'll tell you a little bit more about some other information you can pick up as a recreational pilot shortly. You must only fly in line of sight. If your aircraft is too far away to orientate it, or it's gone behind something and you're no longer able to see what it's doing, then it is no longer in line of sight. No closer than 30 metres to people. That means the aircraft must not be flown any closer than 30 metres to anyone. No flying at night. You must not fly your drone at night without the approval of the likes of the MAAA, etc. And the only way to do that is become a member of that organisation and be flying under their standard operating procedures. No flying over populated areas. This means if you're at a park where it's busy, or a sporting event, or a beach with lots of people, there is no flying in these areas. And please do not fly over anybody at any height. No higher than 400 feet AGL. That means 400 feet above the ground that is below the drone. Yes, there is a rule that says you can fly above 400 feet outside of controlled airspace. However, we strongly recommend that you don't. So they're the basic standard operating conditions for the recreational pilot. Now, some advice that I'll give you. There is an advisory circular that is out. It's called an advisory circular. What this is a document that CASA puts out that gives you advice. Again, I'll put the link in the video here. That gives you advice about how to stay safe as a recreational pilot. It's aimed directly at the recreational pilot. There's a number of advisory circulars that go around for different categories. This one is not the excluded category AC that we've spoken about previously. This is the advisory circular that's aimed directly at the recreational pilot. Some of those standard operating conditions like nighttime flying and all that sort of stuff, you can get around them if you operate under a club like the MAAA. You can operate at night, and you can even do FPV under the MAAA standard operating procedures, as long as you are following their procedures and you're a member and all that sort of stuff. I'll put the link to those two groups as well in the video just here. So there's the MAAA and AMAS. They're the two that you can go and have a look at what it takes to become a member of AMAS or MAAA and fly these things recreationally, and you can extend those possibilities of being able to fly at night and that sort of thing. Doesn't allow you to fly commercially, so forget that. So that's the recreational side of things. That advisory circular that I just told you about has got a lot of great information in it in how to keep you safe, and also the CASA 101s, Part G is where you're interested in for model aircraft. Just the last few things I'll say on recreational. I hear a lot of talk about councils and national parks and all that sort of stuff banning the use of drones. Now, there's a lot of arguments about, can I fly over someone's property and can I fly? Look, at the end of the day, if the national park or a council says no drone flying in this park, essentially what it means is you can't take off and land in that park. That's it. It's their property. They say you can't take off and land in the park. That's it. They're allowed to make those rules on their property. Same as if my backyard here, if I say, you know what, I don't want anybody coming and flying a drone on my backyard either, they're not allowed to take off and land out of my backyard. And it's the same with anything. I don't want someone pitching a tent in my backyard. I don't want someone parking their car in my backyard. It's your property, right? And you get to say what happens on the ground. That's the key point, on the ground of that property. So as far as national parks go in councils, and if you see a sign up that says no drones, you know, you'd be a little silly to go and sit your drone down, power it up and start flying, okay? So my advice to the recreational pilot, seek out other recreational pilots, i.e. go and find your nearest club. They are everywhere. The MAAA have got flying fields scattered all over the place, and AMAS are there. Just go and find them and get involved with them. It's a really good place to start. So that's the recreational rules and whatnot else. While we're there, what designates commercial from recreational? It's really simple equation. If it's anything other than recreation or sport, aside from training, and we'll touch that in a minute, anything other than recreational or sport. So if you're going to put this up over your own business, let's say you're a builder, and you go, you know what, I'm going to fly this over my building site. I want to get some aerial shots for my promos and my brochures. Commercial operation. Let's say I'm going to fly this for Bill. Bill owns his own plumbing business, and I want to go and get a couple of shots of his cars parked up on a grass hill somewhere, and he's going to use them in his promo and in his website. Commercial. I'm going to fly this at a mate's wedding, and I'm going to give him the shots, and you know, commercial. It's not hobby and it's not sport. And we just recently saw someone get pinged quite nicely for flying too close to people at a wedding. So, you know, that's the litmus test. Anything other than hobby or sport, full stop. To get around that, you register yourself for sub 2 kilo standard/excluded category. And then you can do that. So let's move into that now. So what are the standard operating conditions for excluded? They're listed clearly in the CASA 101s, or the Civil Aviation regulations, but to run them down, I'll put them up here behind me. Here are the standard rule sets, or the standard operating conditions for flying the excluded category, i.e. the sub 2 kilo. Similar to the recreational pilot, there's a standard set of operating conditions that apply for the sub 2 kilo excluded category. Firstly, you must only fly in line of sight. Just like the rec pilot, you must be able to see and orientate that aircraft at all times. No closer than 30 metres to people. Same as the rec pilot, 30 metres is the minimum distance you can have that drone to anybody not associated with the aircraft's flying. No flying at night. Same as the recreational pilot, you are not allowed to have that aircraft airborne once it's dark. At the end of last light, that aircraft must be on the ground. No flying over populated areas. It's exactly the same as a recreational pilot. If there's people around, like a beach, sporting event, or a heavily populated park, etc., no flying. No flying in restricted airspace. You must not fly in restricted airspace. You can find these restricted airspaces marked on maps. There are some that you can actually apply for, although the likelihood of getting approval is very, very slim. No closer than 3 nautical miles of a controlled aerodrome. You must not fly your drone any closer than 3 nautical miles. That's 5.5 kilometres from a controlled aerodrome. And do not fly over police or emergency service operations. That means you can't fly your drone over the police or an ambulance at a crash scene or a bushfire operation. Those areas are completely out of bounds unless you have the strict approval from the person who is in charge of that operation. So that's the standard operating conditions under sub 2 kilo. Now there's a lot of argument online with people saying, oh, they can get approval to do this, they can get approval to fly at night. Unfortunately, the excluded category has no room for approval. So you cannot fly at night. You cannot fly closer than 30 metres to people. That's it. If you're going to put this up over Bill's plumbing business, Bill and his crew can't be 30 metres closer to this drone. No closer than 30 metres. You can't brief them and safety brief them and say, oh, those rules do not apply for the sub 2 kilo or the excluded category. The only way to shorten those distances or fly at night or any other approvals you want is to become certified. So 30 metres minimum, and the talent, the person you're filming, is not part of the operation or not allowed. They're not allowed to be closer than 30 metres full stop. You're not allowed to fly over people's heads. Again, there was this argument going around, oh, 40, 50 metres up is more than 30 metres, so there you go. That's not what the regulation was written for, because if this drone falls from, say, 60 metres up, for those that don't know, the speed of gravity, 9.8 metres per second squared, right? Without wind resistance, take that factor out, this thing after 1 second is falling about 30 kilometres an hour. Now, if that hits you on the head, it's going to hurt. The higher you go, the faster it's going to fall until it hits terminal velocity. So 40, 50 metres up is certainly not safer than 30 metres up. You're not allowed to fly over people's heads. Let's just get that clear now. And you're not allowed, you're not allowed to fly within 30 metres laterally. So it doesn't matter who they are, they're not part of the operation. The pilot, on the other hand, yeah, that's different. And if you've got a spotter, I guess, it might be an argument that they're part of the operation. But anyway, that's the rule set for excluded. Now, further to the excluded category, there is a whole bunch of aircraft that are heavier than sub 2 kilo that you can actually fly in the excluded category, but it's on private property. So it can only happen, and it's designed at the farmer, for instance, who's got a big crop and he wants to put up a bigger machine and fly the crops and get crop monitoring and all that sort of stuff. It can be done up to 25 kilo under the current regulations, that's of September 2017, that they can do that without the need of certification. It's the excluded category. Those bigger machines fall into it if you're the owner of the drone, or I think you have permission of the owner, and it's on private property, okay? So other than that, we all know the excluded category as sub 2 kilo because that's the majority of where people lie. But if there's anyone out there who's got your own property, you're on farm or that sort of thing, and you want some further information about being able to put these drones up legally on your property and they weigh more than 2 kilo, pop us an email or give us a call. I'll put all the contact details in the comments of this video, as well as at the end I'll put them up and you can give us a yell and we can give you all that info. Excellent. So that's covered standard operating conditions for recreational, standard operating conditions for the excluded categories, sub 2 kilo. And now I'd like to just quickly talk about certified operations, because there is some interesting information around going about that too. So what is the differences? So the certified operator has to come and do a training course, and most of them are about a week long. At least ours are a week long, in a classroom and practical flying and all that sort of stuff. And it allows you to then expand your operations beyond the standard operating conditions we just spoke about. So for example, you're allowed to fly after you become certified and you go through the whole process and you're operating under a REOC. You can fly these things at night. There is a set of conditions that you need to adhere to and some other bibs and bobs, and we'll get to that later in the series, that allows you to fly these things at night. So there's one we can strike off the list. Closer than 30 metres. We can encroach closer than 30 metres. We can come down to, in fact, to 15 metres. And again, there's a standard set of conditions that you need to abide by. One, for example, is you have to get the person to sign some sort of waiver or an info sheet that lets them know of the risks of putting one of these things within 15 metres of them with spinning blenders, okay? So that can be accomplished. You're allowed to fly or gain approval to fly in restricted airspace. So i.e. there's a big military base near you and there's plenty scattered around the country. We've spoken about them before, Richmond and Nowra and all sorts of places. You can then apply to those organisations who control the restricted airspace and say, hey, look, I'd like to put a drone up at a wedding at a golf course that's inside your restricted airspace, and you can gain those approvals. You can gain approvals for things like BV loss. Now, I know this is a big stretch, but believe me, you can get it. Under the right circumstances, engaging CASA with the right aircraft and the right pilots beyond visual line of sight is not unachievable. So you can get those sorts of approvals. So a whole bunch of stuff. You can get approvals to get closer than 3 nautical miles to an airfield, towered airfield. So it allows you to expand on the standard operating conditions. You can get insurance a whole lot easier. Yes, there is some insurance for the sub 2 kilo market floating around, but obviously the prime insurance that's out there now for public liability and hull insurance all comes down to whether you're certified. You can employ another pilot to work for you and go out and do jobs for you. So it builds on that business. The whole range of stuff that you can do once you become fully certified. I won't go into all those details because I've spoken about them before, but they are the standard operating conditions still apply, and then you get exemptions to be able to do things like nighttime and closer than 30 metres and all that sort of stuff, which is pretty cool. So and allows you obviously to fly a heavier than 2 kilo machine. So the Inspire 1, for instance, Inspire 1, Inspire 2, they're all heavier than 2 kilo. So the only way to use them commercially, whether it's for Bill's wedding or Bill's plumbing business or your own building construction company that you want to put it up over, if it's an Inspire 1 or if an Inspire 2 or anything heavier than 2 kilos, there is no other route than certification. It's the only way it can happen. And there are 2 stages. We'll get to it later in the series, the REOC and the REPL. So that's the start. This is the start of these. I hope this has given you a little bit of an idea on what is required to fly these drones out in the public space, I guess, from a recreational pilot's point of view, from a sub 2 kilo excluded category, or from a fully certified operator. They're the 3 we've got right now. The main question I get asked a lot is, do you need a license to fly these for fun? The answer is no, categorically. Anyone that tells you need a license or you need to register or do anything just to have fun with these aircraft is telling you fibs. No, you do not. You can go and buy one of these from us now and go out and fly it for fun, and there's no registration required. But there are still rules. We spoke about them earlier in the video, so go back and have a look at them if you like. All the links are in the video and in the comments that you need. We're going to do that for every series. So again, we're going to start putting these up. Drone sense. It's what you should have when you fly a drone, not common sense, because common sense ain't that common lately. It's drone sense. And if you have the basic fundamentals of what you can and can't do with these drones, then you're already on the front foot. That's it for this quick one. We'll keep them short and sharp so we're not sitting around for hours listening to me waffle on. We will cover, if you're wondering what this series is going to cover, we will cover everything from how to get this thing operational and show you what the different components are and what the radio control looks like and what brushless motors are and what props are and how it all works, fundamental differences between the machines, all that stuff that is going to help you get started. Of course, there's no certification at the end of this, right? This is purely informative. But my belief, and FPV Australia's belief, has always been that education is the key. So I'm going to put this series of videos out there. We're going to release them every so often, or hopefully one a week, or maybe more than one a week, depending on how time constrained I get. And we'll cover everything as much as we can to get you started. Education is the key. I've said it all along. So we'll go through rules, we'll go through the different hardware types and configurations, we'll go through what you can and can't do, we'll go through getting this out of the box, prepped, pre-flight, battery charging, the dangers of LiPo batteries, the whole box and dice. We're going to cover it all. If you've got any suggestions that you'd like to see some future episodes cover, please feel free to email. So how do you get in contact with us? Our email address is simply training@fpvaustralia.com.au. I'll put it down here in the video. Training@fpvaustralia.com.au. You can phone us on 02 611 8551. You can find our website, fpvaustralia.com.au. If you want to talk about this episode, or you want to suggest some topics for the future episodes, feel free to do that. Our scholarship is still running. This is September when this was recorded, so our scholarship has started running for the next batch of submissions, so get into that. But I'll bring you a new episode shortly, and again, as I always say, if you are flying a drone, either today, tomorrow, next week, next month, please do so safely and responsibly. We need safe skies for all. Enjoy.